What's up, everybody? This is Pac-Man Jake back with another video. The title of this video is Will the 2020 Packers End Up Like the 2017 New York Giants? The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I got a request from a video maker. His name is Anthony, to look at a video he made about the Packers. You can go and watch this video at any time. I'll leave a link to the video in the description. I would also like to encourage you to go check out his channel. It's called Board and Arrow. He makes other good videos too. It's not just a football base, but he also has a few baseball videos and actually some weather broadcasts too. I think he's actually a weather broadcaster. So give this video a thumbs up, and it would also mean a lot to me and to Anthony if you could subscribe to his channel. I'm pretty sure he would appreciate getting a few Packer fans to subscribe to his channel, as well as other fans to go ahead and tell people about this channel. I think Anthony is actually a really good video maker, and I have seen quite a few of his videos, and I've enjoyed a lot of them. But with all that said, let's get into this video.
How do you say that the Giants have a worse offseason than the Green Bay Packers? That's the definition of bias. People love Aaron Rodgers, and that's what's going to be their downfall. You know, people are like, oh, we could save Aaron Rodgers' career. He's going to have flashes, but ultimately he's on the downward trajectory of his career. You have to think about moving on from Aaron Rodgers. We made the mistake as Giants fans thinking we can squeeze the last things out of Eli Manning, and we didn't focus on that offensive line. Hey guys, what's up? My name is Anthony, and welcome to another edition of BNA Sports Talk. And today what I want to talk about is the Green Bay Packers. And I've been making a lot of Giants videos recently. I have a couple trade concept ideas that I liked. But then I realized something. Going into last season, I'm like, the Green Bay Packers remind me a lot of the Giants. That's what I said from the 2016 season. And then what ended up happened. You know, the Giants obviously didn't make the NFC Championship in 2016, but they had a first-year head coach, an aging quarterback, spent a lot on defense, and all of a sudden, they made the playoffs, and what happened over the next couple years is frightening for them. Definitely do like this video if you do enjoy. I'm going to get into what I think the Green Bay Packers shouldn't do, and messages that I have from a Giants fan, booby traps to not fall in. Again, I haven't done a lot of research about the Green Bay Packers in-depth roster. In fact, I'm probably going to make a follow-up video to this video. I just want to record as a naive fan to see whether I'm right or wrong. If you're a Green Bay Packers fan, you completely disagree, let me know. Or if you're like, yeah, I kind of see these warning signs and hopefully they go this certain way, definitely do let me know, because I think it'll be an interesting conversation back and forth. But without further ado, let's begin, because I mentioned some warning signs. You know, first-year head coach, successful, and then Ben McAdoo lost the locker room. That it really happened. Matt LaFleur is a little bit, laid back. Aaron Rodgers, they have kind of a good working relationship. They're both young. Ben McAdoo pounded the table. He wanted Patrick Mahomes. I'm not saying that the Green Bay Packers should draft the quarterback, but they should start thinking about it. And Aaron Gordon later in the rounds. I do not think that they should draft a wide receiver. In 2017, the Giants had Odell, Sterling Shepard, Brandon Marshall. They all got injured in the same game after we were 0-4 into the Chargers game. 0-5, 0-5 turned into 0-7, and then we went 3-13. So the Green Bay Packers were blessed with health. In fact, they were the luckiest team since the 2009 Colts, who made the Super Bowl.
All right, I'm going to pause it here for a sec, you guys. There's a lot of pretty good points here that Anthony pointed out. The Packers were pretty lucky this past year with injuries. I know there was a couple guys that kind of went in and out with injuries, but there were not a whole lot of players that went out with major injuries. Like with the 2017 Giants, Odell Beckham went out with a broken leg, and that was a really, really big blow to the 2017 Giants, and that was probably one of the biggest factors in them going 3-13 because of that. And Ben McAdoo, he just seemed to have just lost the locker room, and there is a whole bunch of other players that went out with injuries besides Odell. When you take a look at here on the injured reserve list, there was a whole bunch of guys that went on injured reserve, and a lot of them were offensive linemen. Like here you have, Justin Pugh, the starting left guard or right guard, whichever position he was at the time, and then center Weston Richburg, who was a really good center for them, out with an injury at some point. And of course you have Odell here. Landon Collins was lost at some point to an injury. I think that led to the ultimate downfall of the 2017 Giants.
Lost. But then they were due for a big regression the next year. Teams that are lucky one year, all of a sudden don't have that luck and they fall back. The Green Bay Packers were beating bad teams. They were beating the Lions. They beat the Bears the first game. The Bears were a good team, you could say, whatever. They were beating teams barely by any points, and even they had some scares against the Panthers with Kyle Allen, against the...
Okay, I would like to pause that here again, and I'd like to point out the Packers' schedule here on where Anthony was pointing out some of the good teams and the bad teams. Starting here with the first game here at Chicago, the Bears were widely seen as actually as a good team going in. I know that they finished 8-8, but this is a division rival here. The Packers have beaten all their division rivals, whether they were good or bad. They are division rivals. These teams know each other very well. We know the Bears, they know us, and the Lions. The Lions, I get it. They were a bad team because they had Matthew Stafford out with an injury, but they played us hard. But regardless, the Minnesota Vikings, we beat them twice. They were pretty good, and they made the playoffs. I also like to go down the list one by one to point out some of the good teams that we beat. Like let's see, we beat the Kansas City Chiefs, but they were without Patrick Mahomes, so the injuries kind of did play a little bit of luck into our favor. Yeah, the Minnesota Vikings were a good team. The Dallas Cowboys were actually, at the time when we played them, they were actually pretty good. But they were kind of starting to go on the downfall of that. And then some of the bad teams I would like to point out that we did play and we did beat and we should have beaten them. So it's not like if we had lost to one of these bad teams, that probably could have been a problem for us. But the point I would like to make is that we were beating teams that we should have beaten, like the Denver Broncos at home. And then you have a couple other bad teams, the Oakland Raiders at home, the New York Giants at MetLife, the Washington Redskins at home, and then at Detroit, and then Detroit at home also. They were pretty bad, and the Carolina Panthers will end up going away with a losing record because they lost Cam Newton to start out, and they did have Kyle Allen, who was a pretty good average starter, but the guy that was in charge of that was leading the charge for the Panthers was not Allen, it was actually their running back, Christian McCaffrey. So Kyle Allen really wasn't the main guy leading the Panthers offensively, it was McCaffrey. Kyle Allen was more or less of a game manager, whereas it was McCaffrey that was the big reason why the Panthers were, and we were. I gotta spell this out. We were bad against the run, and that's kind of why the Panthers were able to hang in with us, because with a 24-16 win, and that's just how a lot of these teams were able to stay in these games, is because they had a running game, and we didn't know how to stop the run. So that's what I would like to point out, is that I kind of have to slightly disagree with point number one, is because we did lose, we just barely beat some bad teams, that's true, but then when we did barely beat the bad teams, I know we weren't blowing them out like a lot of people think that we should have, and maybe that was kind of something that is true. We did barely beat some bad teams, and losing to some good teams. I like to go back again and point out the only good teams that we lost to. One of them right here is the San Francisco 49ers. We lost to them by virtue of very much a speed and physicality mismatch. I mean, the 49ers just flat out knew how to beat us, and the other bad teams that we lost to, the other good team that we lost to was the Philadelphia Eagles, who wound up making the playoffs. But it was a very close game, and it pretty much went down to the wire. So it's not like we got blown out by a whole bunch of good teams. The only one we did was the 49ers, and the loss against the LA Chargers. They were a 5-11 team, and the reason why we lost to them is because it was very much in the same fashion of what happened with the 49ers. Speed and physicality mismatch, and that's what ultimately led to those two losses. And I gotta say that was the ultimate thing that broke the camel's back right there, was that this team was kind of exposed as a team that was just too slow, and did lack some physicality on both of the offensive line and the defensive line, but particular on the defensive line.
Giants against the Redskins, so they're beating up on bad teams last year. And by the way, against a good team, San Francisco, they looked.
We were beating teams that we should have beaten, and the Giants also did the same thing. Here is in the 2016 season. Here's the roster. I'm going to go over that. I'm going to try to get to the schedule right here. All right, for the 2016 Giants here are some of the good teams that they beat. The first one was the Dallas Cowboys at Jerry World. That's no easy feat. 20-19. The Dallas Cowboys were, at the time, they were not really seen as projected to go 13-3. They did, and I mean, the 2016 Giants, they swept the Dallas Cowboys that ultimately went 13-3 and won the division and the number 1 seed. They had some division rival games that they lost to, like the Washington Redskins, who wound up finishing 8-7-1, and the Philadelphia Eagles, who were average. They lost to a good team in the Pittsburgh Steelers at Heinz Field. They lost to us at Lambeau. That's not easy for them to beat. It's hard to beat us at Lambeau, and then at Minnesota. Minnesota was pretty decent that year. But you guys beat the New Orleans Saints 16-13. New Orleans Saints are a good football team. The Baltimore Ravens, you guys beat them pretty soundly, and the Chicago Bears, well, they always suck. So, I mean, you guys have beaten teams that you should have beaten. I mean, the Cincinnati Bengals at Cleveland, and albeit you guys were losing players left and right in that wrong season in 2016. Yeah, I mean, the Giants had a really good season.
The roster looked awful. In the playoffs, they got lucky. They beat up on, I think, Seattle in the first round, and all they had to do is win one game.
Against Seattle, by the way, the Seattle Seahawks were a pretty good team, and we beat them. And at the very first, at the second half, before the Seattle Seahawks came roaring back, we were dominating that game. Russell Wilson had to put on Superman cape and literally bring the Seattle Seahawks back into the game all by himself. He had no running game. He had an old Marshawn Lynch. He had a backup running back in Travis Homer. So I definitely got to give Seattle some credit for fighting back. And, it was a home game, and the Packers, for a good period of the stretch, were absolutely dominating that game.
To get to the NFC Championship, the Giants, same thing happened with them. And then we got to the playoffs. We played a superior team in Green Bay. I think Eli played great in it, but it's whatever. I'm not going to mention.
Eli did play great in that game. Not so much the other guys didn't really play all that great. Odell Beckham.
That point, Eli Manning, an aging quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, aging quarterback, both were 36 years old. Aaron Rodgers was 36, Eli Manning was 36, and we tried to draft a wide receiver and tight end to extend his career. Then the next year, we doubled down and tried to, spend a running back to extend his career. Now, Saquon Barkley, I like him, but, we made a little bit of a mistake there. But talking about more specifically at 2017, we drafted Evan Ingram. The Green Bay Packers have much more needs than just a wide receiver, and I'm pretty sure you Green Bay Packers fans know. In my opinion, their 3 biggest needs, their number 1 is left tackle. Losing Brian Bulaga was a big deal. I know he was aging, but still, you needed a right tackle. Now you need a left.
Brian was the right tackle. We actually have a left tackle, and I'm going to show here really quick the graphic of our starting offensive line in 2019. So here are the 2019 Packers starting offensive linemen, starting with left tackle David Bakhtiari, who made the Pro Bowl as the left tackle after a slow start. At left guard was the rookie Elton Jenkins, who wound up finishing off with a pretty good Pro Football Focus grade of 69.2. Not great, but pretty good. And the number of sacks allowed, 0. Goose egg. That's actually really good for a starting rookie left guard. Corey Linsley, our center, allowed 5 sacks, which was first among centers. Our starting right guard was Billy Turner. He was probably the weak link of our offensive line, and I'm still a little bit leery about him starting at right guard, but I'm not sure who else we can get that is better. And then our right tackle was Brian Balaga, who graded the second best from Pro Football Focus out of our offensive line group, with David Bakhtiari finishing at 78.6. Brian Balaga snubbed from the Pro Bowl again, and obviously should have been put into the Pro Bowl this year after a great season from him. He will be missed for sure, and our starting right tackle will be Rick Wagner, so fingers crossed, you guys, that he can fill in the shoes of the big shoes of Brian Balaga, Iowa, well enough to protect Aaron Rodgers. So, all of this said, the Packers' offensive line, when healthy, was a really good offensive line. It was by no means bad. I know that the sacks are quite a bit. That's just because Aaron Rodgers will hold onto the football too long and take more sacks.
Tackle. Your defense got exposed. You think your defense is great all of a sudden? Well, it got exposed by the San Francisco 49ers. Now there's a recipe to beat it. The Giants, our defense fell apart, and we spent a lot in free agency as well. We drafted Landon Collins, but we brought in a bunch of guys. We had really invested into our defense before that season. And you had a general manager just like dump everything into it. Now, Green Bay doesn't have a general manager, obviously. Owners, obviously. They're more family owned, so it's a little bit of concern. But don't get.
It's fan owned, and I'd like to go backtrack here for a sec. I kind of missed something.
But we brought in a bunch of guys. We had really invested in the 49ers. Now there's.
Okay. Here's where I want to go back and emphasize a few things. Yes, this was this past year. The Packers went out and signed a whole bunch of players on defense. The Smith brothers and Adrian Amos. The Giants did something pretty similar to that in 2016. They brought in some defensive players, spent a whole ton of money on guys like that. I'm going to go right up to and find who they signed. Yes, right here. Here's where the similarities are, and I thought that was pretty interesting how Anthony pointed out this little tidbit, is that the Giants went out and spent pretty heavily on defense, starting with cornerback Janoris Jenkins, Jack Rabbit, and Olivier Vernon, the edge rusher coming from the Miami Dolphins, and then Damon Snacks Harrison from the New York Jets. So I thought that was pretty good to point out there. I mean, that was something that was kind of in the forefront of my thinking, and I'm like, the Packers are spending quite heavily like the 2016 Giants did, but it was a little bit differently because the Packers double-dipped at edge rusher, and the Giants just got one of each for the position of corner, defensive end, and defensive tackle. But I understand the similarity, so the point is that the Packers did spend heavily on defense, and kind of ignoring offense and not spending very much there, except for Billy Turner, our offensive guard. Some pass protection and run blocking for our running backs, Jonesy and Jamal.
It's a recipe to beat it. The Giants, our defense fell apart, and we spent a lot in free agency as well. We drafted Landon Collins, but we brought in a bunch of guys. We had really invested into our defense before that season. And you had a general manager just like dump everything into it. Now, Green Bay doesn't have a general manager, obviously. Owners, obviously. They're more family owned, so it's a little bit of concern. But don't get obsessed with Aaron Rodgers and his success. Don't do it. He used to rely on his physical abilities. His ability is just to run outside the pocket and throw it down the field because he has a big arm. Now I think his physical traits are going to be on the decline. Now he has to rely more on his mechanics that he hasn't really developed. That was one of his biggest concerns coming out of the draft in 2005. And so definitely Aaron Rodgers, you're going to have to find his replacement soon. The Giants, we stuck with Eli Manning, and that was a big mistake. Our head coach wanted to draft a quarterback and move on from Eli Manning, but our ownership didn't want to do it. I would think about starting to move on from Aaron Rodgers. Some viable options: Josh Rosen, Jameis Winston, Cam Newton. Start thinking about bringing these guys in. I don't care what Aaron Rodgers thinks. It's about your long-term future. Now, Brian Bulaga, you lost him. You have to draft a left tackle in the first round. Josh Jones, maybe even.
I'd like to pause this here for a really quick sec. With point number one, I agree with. Draft an offensive tackle. I definitely would like to have a developmental offensive tackle to possibly eventually replace the departed Brian Bulaga. We did bring in Rick Wagner from free agency to fill in that hole as a kind of more of like a temporary stopgap option. He is signed for only just 2 years, so I think that Rick will be more of just a fill-in for the time being. And speaking of left tackle, our left tackle David Bakhtiari's contract is set to expire after the 2020 season, so it's very possible that the Packers may have to look into getting offensive tackles back-to-back in back-to-back drafts, possibly in the first round. If we cannot get Bakhtiari back, we are going to have to do that. So I am all in favor of getting an offensive tackle in the first round. So I would definitely like to give Anthony some wherewithal and some foresight to be able to see that our offensive line should be a top priority. Point number two here is have a quarterback plan. He mentioned Josh Rosen. I like Josh Rosen. I would be all in favor of making a trade for Josh Rosen, who could possibly wind up being a good developmental quarterback behind Aaron and could possibly even be a good backup. And number three is nail late round draft picks for depth. Amen, Anthony. Let's just nail every draft pick for number four. Hope Rodgers doesn't regress. Yes, that's the hope, that he doesn't regress, and Aaron is going to have to play well for us upcoming, but if we do have a very good football team around Aaron, I definitely believe that this team could be successful. But Aaron will have to play pretty well at this juncture because we are facing some uncertainties with some areas on our team right now. We have some question marks at right tackle. We have a question mark at inside linebacker. We have a question mark at 3-4 defensive end. So I'm just want to be able to throw that out, and now I'll continue the video.
A big guy, maybe Mekhi Becton falls that far. Even trade up, Mekhi Becton. Focus on your left tackle of the future. It's going to be your staple, your foundation for the next couple of years. You need to focus on that. Wide receivers, not important. They got really lucky with injuries last year. Everyone is healthy, and they had guys like Devontae Adams, Lazard, Scantling. So they're going to lose a bunch of those guys next year. But honestly, their backups aren't much better. I would get a grizzled veteran in that locker room. The options, not too much. You should have done something better. They have $20 million in cap space, and somehow the Giants got rated to have a worse offseason than the Green Bay Packers. I'm sick and tired of all this Giants bias. Let me just rant.
That's nuts to say that the Giants had a worse offseason than us. I thought the Giants had a really good offseason. They did hit on some areas that they needed to work on, which was get some inside linebackers. They got Blake. They brought back David Mayo. They signed a cornerback, James Bradberry. I happen to like James Bradberry. I think he's a pretty good corner, a little bit inconsistent, but you guys filled a need with signing Bradberry. And with the upcoming NFL draft, the Giants can make their team even better. With the number 4 overall pick, they're primed to get a bookend right tackle to pair with Nate Solder, and then in the second round you can get another corner again. I'll have a mock draft coming out in a little bit, and I will try to make sure that I can get this this video after the mock draft after this video to point out and highlight what the Giants could possibly get and make their team better.
For a second here, because the Giants got Blake Martinez, who the Green Bay Packers lost. The Giants got James Bradberry, a corner. They got a bunch of depth pieces at safety. Who else did we get? We got Nate Ebner. We got a long snapper. I know those are little moves, but somehow the Green Bay Packers had a better offseason when they lost their entire depth of their roster. Jimmy Graham. Don't try to replace Jimmy Graham if you're the Green Bay Packers, but the Giants,
we already have a replacement for Jimmy Graham. His name is Jace Sternberger. Let's go, Jace. And yeah, we did lose a lot of people in this past off season. We lost Brian, we lost Blake. Um, yeah, right now we look a little bit weaker than we did uh, coming into this off season. There's no doubt about it.
How do you say that the Giants have a worse offseason than the Green Bay Packers? That's a definition of bias. People love Aaron Rodgers, and that's what's going to be their downfall. People are like, oh.
I don't think that's why people are saying that the Giants had a worse off season than the Packers. It's not a bias thing towards our quarterback. They think that the Giants had a bad off season because they just simply just don't know what the Giants really got. They probably think that James Bradbury is some bum, or they think Blake Martinez is some bum. You know what I mean? I don't think it's a bias thing. I just maybe think that some people just don't know what the Giants did and what they did to upgrade their team, and they can still make a whole ton of upgrades. I think also people are going to rip on the Giants for not going after an offensive tackle in free agency, but once they pick an offensive tackle in the draft, they will eat their words. I can guarantee you, Anthony, they will eat their words. And the New York Giants, look out for them, man. Look out for them. They could be pretty good under Joe Judge, their new head coach.
We could save Aaron Rodgers' career. He's going to have flashes, but ultimately he's on the downward trajectory of his career. You have to think about moving on from Aaron Rodgers. We made the mistake as Giants fans thinking we can squeeze the last things out of Eli Manning, and we didn't focus on that offensive line. Offensive line in 2017 was pitiful. I think we still had Eric Flowers at that point. It was just awful. Don't make the same mistake that the Giants did. Focus on the offensive line. That's the most important thing. They got exposed by good teams last year. The Giants got exposed by good teams. And I think that they're on a very similar trajectory path with coaches, with, schedule, with everything. And now they play a first-place schedule. It's going to be harder. And they're going to end up, I'm going to predict it now, 5-11. The only reason why I'm not confident in this prediction is that this division lost a lot of talent with the Minnesota Vikings. I know you extended Kirk Cousins. Dalvin Cook, can you trust his health? Everson Griffin. Sheldon Richardson left 2 years ago. Xavier Rhodes wasn't playing great, but, and the offensive line, now you have a left tackle that's, 10 years in this league. He's not really playing that well. So you have a lot of holes if you're the Minnesota Vikings. They have to draft well this year. I think that the Vikings may have an off year. And then you take a look at the Bears and the Lions. I'm not too confident in them either. But my early prediction right now is 5-11 for the Green Bay Packers. Let me know if I'm wrong. Let me know if I'm completely wrong, whether I'm completely misguided, whether you think Aaron Rodgers still has a little bit of juice left in that jar, and whether you think, oh, now Anthony, he needs a wide receiver. And all opinions will be appreciated. I may just be a naive Giants fan, but I think the Green Bay Packers are headed down the wrong path, especially if they draft a wide receiver in round 1, which I think is what they're going to do because they love Aaron Rodgers. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.
All right, certainly lots to take away from this video here, coming from a Green Bay Packers side, but I would like to let you know that this is a Giants fan. He is certainly trying to do his due diligence on the Packers, and I thought he made some really good points for sure. I would agree to have to disagree with the predicted record that Anthony had for us. I think 5-11 is certainly a possibility if we don't do well in the NFL draft, and Ricky Wagner turns out to be an injury-prone bust for us, and Aaron's just going to get sacked a lot coming from the right side of our offensive line. I just think that the two situations between the Packers and the Giants are a little too different. The roster was a little bit more different for the New York Giants, and the 2017 Giants had some really bad luck with injuries. I'm going to go back to right here and look at the injured reserve list. I mean, their season was just not, it was going awful. And I'm thinking that if this team has as much bad luck as the 2017 Giants did, we could see a bad season from the Packers. Like, if we were to lose Devontae Adams, that would be devastating. That would be devastating. It would be like losing Odell Beckham. And if some of our offensive linemen went out with injuries, like Ricky Wagner, for example, or one of our guards, Elton Jenkins, Billy Turner, I can see a scenario where the Packers could have a bad season because of injuries and just not being able to make the certain upgrades in the NFL draft to fill the holes that we need to fill. I see where Anthony is coming from. So, and I do get that Aaron Rodgers is probably a little bit on the decline right now, but we also got to take this into perspective. Is Aaron Rodgers at 36 better than Eli Manning was when he was 36? I think most of us would say yes, and a lot of NFL fans would say yes. I mean, no disrespect to Eli, I thought he was absolutely phenomenal in 2016 for the Giants. He was able to win a lot of games for them. The Giants were very good. In 2017, things just did not go so well for Eli because he did lose wide receiver. He did lose wide receivers. He lost Brandon Marshall. He lost, obviously, he lost Odell, and that put things in limbo for the Giants. So, like I said, there's just a lot to take from it. I'm only just going to try to give you just a little bit of what went on. I may have a few things wrong about what happened with the Giants, and I just hope that I was able to come back and nail every single point. But of course, this is just to give us, the Packer fans, side of for this video. So I know that Anthony's just trying to learn a little bit more about the Packers, so that's why I made this video. So just to give some intel coming from our side to educate others about the Packers instead of just listening to the talking heads talk about the Packers and giving their false narratives or half-truths on whatever it is. Aaron Rodgers, he's an old declining quarterback, he's not that good anymore, and all that yada yada yada. So that's all I really have to say on this video, and let me know what you think about all of this stuff in the comment section. If you have not given this video a thumbs up for Anthony's video, and go right ahead and do it, that would be great. I'm pretty sure he would appreciate it. Also, give this video a thumbs up, and if you are new to this channel, please go right ahead and subscribe for more Packer content and even more things, NFL mock drafts, and anything else that pertains to football, and possibly even more. So with that, I'll catch you guys later, and as always, go Pack, go!